Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are taking aim at this really powerful emotional engine. It's hiding beneath, well, nearly all human interaction, really. The one we're maybe most ashamed to admit to. That feeling that's constantly at work, secretly driving our choices.
Yeah, envy.
Envy.
It's the great unmentionable, isn't it? We'll talk about greed, maybe lust, but envy. No way.
Never.
There's that writer, Joseph Epstein, he had a great line. He said that of the 7 deadly sins, only envy is no fun at all.
Right. It feels entirely corrosive when you're in it. Just eats away at you.
Absolutely. But what if it's not just corrosive?
What do you mean?
Well, what if that really painful, uncomfortable feeling is actually essential? Like, what if envy in its, raw form isn't just a moral failing, but maybe an adaptive mechanism?
Okay, like an engine,
Hey,
driving status, ambition,
yeah,
maybe even keeping social order.
exactly. So our mission today is to unpack the stack of sources we've looked at. They treat envy not just as a sin, but as, well, a psychological and social phenomenon.
Right. We're going to explore its evolutionary roots, which are pretty ancient.
And its dual nature, which is surprisingly complex. Is there such a thing as good envy?
That's a big question. And then how modern social media has just amplified it, turned it into almost a public health crisis.
Yeah, it really has. And finally, maybe how science is suggesting we can actually harness it, use it like a personal GPS or something.
Okay, so this deep dive feels critical because, like you said, it's so hidden.
Yeah.
And the sources seem to say, look, until you define it, until you acknowledge it, you can't manage it.
You can't. And the very first step, absolutely crucial, is getting clear on 2 terms we mix up all the time. Envy versus jealousy.
Ah, yes, the classic confusion. We use them interchangeably.
We do. But psychologically, in the research, they're treated as fundamentally different experiences, different beasts entirely.
Okay, let's break that down now. What's the core difference?
Okay, so envy. Envy is that unpleasant feeling you get from an upward social comparison. You look at someone who seems superior, maybe status, possessions, talent, even affection.
And you feel deficient, lacking. The absolute core of envy is wanting something someone else has and you don't.
So it's about my lack, my feeling of inadequacy.
Exactly. That's why it often leads to these really deep feelings of inadequacy, defectiveness, maybe inferiority. And that's why the sources consistently tag it as shame-inducing.
The shame isn't about wanting the thing. It's about feeling less than because you don't have it.
Precisely. It's that internal judgment pain. You want their life, their promotion, their family, their talent, whatever it is. The key word is lack. You lack it.
Okay, so that's envy. What about jealousy then? How is that different?
Jealousy needs a triangle. Always. There's you, there's your rival, and there's a valued resource.
Like a relationship.
Usually a relationship, yeah. Or affection, status. Something you believe is rightfully yours, and you're afraid of losing it to that rival.
So jealousy is about protection, defending your territory.
Fundamentally, yes. Protecting a possession you already feel belongs to you. Okay, so using an example. If my partner starts spending a lot of time with a new colleague, that feeling I get, that's jealousy.
That's likely jealousy.
Yeah.
You're defending the relationship territory. You might feel angry, fearful of loss, but not necessarily ashamed of yourself in the same way as envy.
Because the relationship is mine to defend, in my mind.
Right. And the sources point out, admitting to jealousy, while it's definitely uncomfortable, it carries less social shame than admitting envy. Society kind of validates your right to protect what's yours.
Whereas admitting envy feels like admitting you're inferior.
It does. So that distinction is absolutely the foundation for managing these feelings. Ask yourself, am I feeling the inferiority and longing of envy? Or am I feeling the fear and defensiveness of jealousy? The answer really guides where you go next. Self-improvement or maybe relationship security work.
Okay, so if envy is so deeply unpleasant, so socially shameful, why do we even have it? Why didn't evolution just, get rid of it?
That's the million-dollar question with a lot of negative emotions, isn't it? Fear, anxiety, envy. They're not evolutionary mistakes.
They serve a purpose.
They're products of these really deep-seated survival mechanisms, things that helped our ancestors achieve goals, maintain social order. The sources are pretty clear. Social comparison, the thing that triggers envy. It actually had value for our survival.
How so? How did comparing help us survive?
Well, it helped us figure out where we stood in the hierarchy, in the group.
Right, okay. If you're living in a small group, resources are scarce. Knowing how you stack up against others, what resources they have, that's critical information, keeps you alert.
Absolutely vital. For early humans, community wasn't just nice, it was survival. And
Mhm.
our ability to compare kept us aligned with that protective pack.
So if someone else figured out a better way to hunt or found a reliable water source,
Envy, in its earliest form, probably motivated you, either to copy that successful behavior or at least to register, okay, the social hierarchy might be shifting a bit here. The emotion is basically coordinating a response to resource inequality.
okay, that makes sense. But here's where it gets a bit weird, evolutionarily speaking. The whole paradox of proximity.
Ah, yes. Love this one.
If envy is about getting resources, shouldn't we be most envious of the people with the most resources? Like, shouldn't we be green with envy over Elon Musk or Bill Gates? Their success is massive.
Logically, yes. Common sense says the bigger the prize, the stronger the envy. But the research, a lot of it based on these clever thought experiments, shows the exact opposite.
We're more envious of people similar to us.
Significantly more envious, almost always, of someone similar who's just slightly better off. Your peer, your sibling, the neighbor who's maybe 50% wealthier or got that promotion you wanted, much more than someone like Bill Gates who is just way off scale.
But why? Why does my colleague getting a slightly bigger office trigger more intense envy than the CEO who owns a private jet? It feels irrational.
It feels irrational, but the evolutionary logic is actually super efficient,
Yeah.
really resource savvy. Envy evolved to motivate us to get resources that are crucially attainable. Think about it. If you're working a regular job trying to compete with a billionaire, it's just a futile waste of resources, right? The mental and emotional energy. Zero return. Your brain's running this quick cost-benefit analysis under the surface.
So comparing myself to someone way outside my league, my brain just goes, nope, irrelevant to my current situation.
Pretty much. But then you look at your neighbor, similar job, similar skills, maybe similar background, and they just got that big promotion. Their success feels like a real possibility for you.
It's proof it can be done.
Exactly. That slightly more successful peer provides what the sources call an existence proof. It shows the resources actually within reach for someone like you.
And that's what provides the stronger motivation, either to work harder, the benign envy path,
Or potentially to get aggressive about acquiring it, since the gap seems bridgeable, maybe the more malicious side.
so this means envy really only fires up when the comparison feels genuinely informative, relevant.
Precisely. And this loops back to the conditions needed for envy. Aristotle actually talked about this centuries ago, and modern psychology basically confirms it.
What did Aristotle say?
He argued that envy only really arises when there's a perceived sense of equality or similarity between you and the person you envy.
The comparison has to matter to my self-concept.
Totally. If you're a professional chef, you probably don't feel intense driving envy towards a super successful accountant, right?
No, not really.
You feel it towards the chef down the street who just got a Michelin star. It has to be in a domain that hits home, that affects how you see yourself and your future.
You see this a lot in workplaces, don't you? Like, if a colleague gets promoted, people feel way more envious if they think it was unfair, maybe favoritism.
Yes, compared to if the person was just genuinely better and deserved it.
Why the difference?
Because the undeserved promotion messes with that perceived equality and fairness within the pack. If we think the system is fair, the feeling might lean towards admiration or that benign striving envy. But if we think it's rigged, that injustice fuels the malicious kind of envy because their success feels like it invalidates your hard work.
Okay, let's shift to the brain. How does this actually look biologically? Researchers have put this idea of similarity and attainability into fMRI scanners. Right.
They have. They created these scenarios where participants imagine themselves in certain situations. And the setup that reliably generated the most reported envy was what they called the Spey condition.
High.
Superior but high similarity. So the participant imagines comparing themselves upwards to a peer, someone who shares key interests, maybe background, but has achieved much better outcomes.
Basically the paradox of proximity playing out in the brain scan.
Exactly. The brain lights up most when the success is both super relevant and just slightly out of reach.
And which parts of the brain are working hardest then?
3 main regions showed significantly more activity in that high envy condition. First, the right angular gyrus.
Okay, what does that do?
It's a really important hub for social cognition, self-processing, understanding others' perspectives, theory of mind stuff.
So, processing the social info, who succeeded.
Right. Then second, the precuneus, that's linked to retrieving personal memories, self-consciousness, figuring out where you stand relative to your environment.
Integrating the social info with the self, where do I stand compared to them?
You got it. And the third area was the left superior frontal gyrus, or SFG.
Wow.
These areas are buzzing during that painful comparison moment.
Okay, so those areas light up with envy. But you mentioned something about modulation, like how the brain tries to handle it.
Yes, this is maybe the most fascinating part. It's not just where envy happens, but how the brain might try to dampen it down.
How?
They found this crucial link. When there was greater functional connectivity, basically, stronger communication between that left superior frontal gyrus, the SFG, and other regions like the supramarginal gyrus and precuneus,
Yeah.
the participants reported feeling less envy.
So a stronger connection means less pain. What's the SFG's main job?
It's a key part of the prefrontal cortex. Heavy hitter in cognitive control, executive function, and really relevant here, the cognitive reappraisal of negative emotions.
Like the brain's control tower for rational thought and managing feelings.
Exactly. So if you can successfully use that SFG network to reframe the comparison, maybe thinking, wow, they work incredibly hard, I could learn from that, instead of just, ugh, they don't deserve it.
You can actually suppress that negative emotional surge.
That seems to be the mechanism. It's the neurological basis for strategic self-control. The better that connection works, the better you are at modulating that awful feeling, maybe shifting it from raw shame towards a more rational assessment.
Which sets us up perfectly for the next bit, doesn't it?
Mm.
Exploring those two faces of envy, the driver and the destroyer.
Yeah, the old idea of envy just being a deadly sin assumes it's only destructive, pure poison.
But the research says it's more complicated. It has this duality.
It reflects how we process that initial comparison pain. Researchers basically distinguish between two main forms.
Right, we mentioned them. Benign and malicious. Let's really nail down the difference.
Okay. Benign envy, BE. This is framed as the constructive one. You acknowledge the other person's success, you feel that sting of your own deficiency, but you use that feeling to motivate yourself, to strive. The goal is to lift yourself up to their level. It's conceptually about leveling up through hard work, self-improvement.
It's the, I wish I had that, so I'm going to work my butt off to get it feeling. Focuses on my lack, not their downfall.
Correct.
Yeah.
Then you have malicious envy, ME. This is the really corrosive path.
The dark side.
Totally. It leads to hostility, resentment, this
Yeah.
powerful desire for the envied person to lose their advantage. The goal isn't self-improvement, it's pulling them down. Social leveling by destruction.
And this is where Schadenfreude comes in, right? A little bit of glee when they stumble.
Textbook ME. When the high-status person messes up, the malicious envier feels relief, maybe even satisfaction. Huh. See? Not so perfect after all.
Now, benign envy often gets presented in, like, self-help stuff as purely good, functional, positive.
Yeah, the good envy.
But the sources threw a curveball here. They suggest even this good envy isn't entirely clean. It connects to the darker side of ambition.
This was a really surprising finding, yeah. It pushes back against that simple good-bad split. To understand it, we need to bring in the dark triad of personality traits.
Okay, remind us what those are again. Machiavellianism.
Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. They're basically personality traits that are seen as socially undesirable, but maybe disturbingly, often linked to success in competitive fields.
Can you quickly define Machiavellianism again? It's not just about being cunning, is it?
Right. Machiavellianism is more about cynicism, emotional manipulation, strategic exploitation of others, really focusing on self-interest over moral considerations. The ends justify the means, basically.
Got it. And psychopathy.
That involves callousness, impulsivity, antisocial behavior, lack of empathy,
And narcissism.
grandiosity, entitlement, needing admiration, dominance.
Okay, so three pretty dark traits. Where does envy fit in?
Well, the research shows some pretty clear, strong links. Malicious envy, the destructive kind, correlates strongly with both Machiavellianism and psychopathy.
That kind of makes sense, right?
It-
If you want others to fail, you might be manipulative or lack empathy.
Exactly. The link with psychopathy was particularly strong in one big study. It confirms this is the really cold, dark side of envy.
But the really interesting bit is the so-called good envy. What about benign envy?
Here's the twist. Benign envy is also associated with Machiavellian tendencies, maybe to a lesser degree than ME, but the link is there.
Whoa. So even when envy motivates us to strive to level up, it's still tied to being manipulative or strategically exploitative.
That's the implication, a really critical psychological insight. It suggests that using envy constructively to climb the ladder It still involves competitive, strategic, maybe sometimes ruthless, self-interested behavior to get ahead.
So success driven by striving isn't always pure, innocent ambition. It might involve maneuvering, networking in a calculated way, maybe suppressing empathy for competitors.
You could call it functional malevolence. It suggests the drive to succeed, even when fueled by BE, isn't just quiet self-improvement. It's fundamentally about competition, about status acquisition, and that often requires a Machiavellian toolkit.
And the studies back this up with actual career outcomes.
They did. Machiavellian behaviors, which were predicted by most types of envy, correlated with higher occupational status. People who are more strategic, whether their envy is benign or malicious, tend to rise higher professionally.
But there was a catch, wasn't there? Something about malicious envy itself.
Yes, a really important caveat. While the strategic behavior linked to envy helps you climb, malicious envy itself had a small negative correlation with status.
Ah. So being strategic helps, but being purely destructive ultimately hurts your career.
That looks like the takeaway. It's the ultimate psychological warning shot. If your envy is just about resentment, sabotage, wishing others ill, you're wasting energy hurting others instead of helping yourself. It backfires in the long run.
Okay, let's make this concrete.
Yeah.
Let's look at the workplace study, the one with nurses. How did self-efficacy, like confidence in your skills, affect whether envy turned benign or malicious?
This was a great study because it isolated a really tangible factor,
Yeah.
self-efficacy. A person's belief in their own ability to do their job well, achieve goals.
And what did they find with the nurses?
The results were really stark. Self-efficacy was negatively related to malicious envy, meaning more confidence, less destructive envy.
Okay.
But self-efficacy was positively related to benign envy, more confidence, more constructive, striving envy.
So if a nurse feels competent, feels like she has mastery over her work, when a colleague succeeds, she's less likely to feel that bitter resentment.
Much less likely. Instead, she's more likely to see that success as something she could potentially achieve too.
Because the upward comparison doesn't trigger that deep shaming inadequacy. It triggers motivation.
Exactly. When you feel competent, the gap doesn't seem permanent or impossible. It feels like something you can bridge. But if you have low self-efficacy, a peer's success can feel crushing, like proof you'll never make it.
And that defaults the feeling to resentment, the desire to pull them down.
That seems to be the pattern. The gap feels too big, too painful otherwise.
Did the sources suggest any practical ways to, nudge envy towards the benign side based on this?
They did. They pointed squarely at improving self-efficacy, specifically through things like investment in higher education, professional training.
So for the nurses, getting more education, more skills that boosts their core competence.
Right. And that, in turn, directly reduces the likelihood of malicious envy and increases the chance of channeling that competitive energy into constructive striving. It's like a policy idea drawn straight from emotional psychology.
This ties into self-control too, doesn't it? Malicious envy feels impulsive, like a hot reaction. Benign envy seems to require planning, effort.
Definitely. Malicious envy can feel like this immediate reactive pain. Benign envy requires you to manage that pain and plan a long-term response.
How did researchers measure this role of self-control?
They needed a way to see persistence in action. So they used tasks like difficult problem-solving puzzles, complex. Sudoku was one example. Things where you need sustained effort to succeed.
And sticking with the hard puzzle that mirrored the effort needed for benign envy.
That was the idea. Self-control, in that context, was the willingness to persist when things got tough.
And that persistence is what benign envy requires, right? To stick with the goal.
Absolutely. The effort shown in those tasks lines up perfectly with the goal-oriented drive of benign envy. Overcoming the pull of malicious envy requires active self-regulation.
So if you lack that self-control, if you just give up when faced with a successful peer, or maybe you give in to the urge to gossip or undermine them,
then that painful feeling of inferiority can easily default straight into the resentment of malicious envy.
it's like the ability to sit with a difficult problem is psychologically similar to sitting with the discomfort of comparison and making a plan, instead of just lashing out.
It's channeling that energy, using those cognitive control parts of the brain, like the SFG we talked about, to manage the shame and redirect the energy into persistent, difficult striving. That's the benign envy path. It's a deliberate choice, mediated by self-control.
Okay, so evolution wired us for comparison, but modern tech,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like it's taken that wiring and just completely overloaded it, right? We're living in this age of envy overload.
That's a perfect way to put it. We're not just comparing ourselves to the neighbor with the slightly better car anymore.
No, We're comparing ourselves to, what, billions of people? Filtered, curated, persected versions of people?
Exactly. Social media, especially the visual ones like Instagram, has basically weaponized that comparison instinct. It's
What?
just this constant fire hose of glamorized, often manipulated images of ideal bodies and beauty, perfect vacations, perfect careers.
Comparison completely stripped of context.
Totally. And unlike seeing your neighbor maybe once a day, this comparison is constant. It's in your pocket. It's immediate, unavoidable.
And this deluge, this constant stream of perfection, it's having a measurable, frankly, disastrous effect
Yeah.
on public health. And
Oh,
the
that's
platforms,
fast.
they know it.
Oh, they know. The sources really highlighted the 2021 whistleblower testimony from Frances Haugen. She released internal research from Facebook, now Meta,
Ah,
showing just how damaging Instagram can be. Their own studies found that for 1 in 3 girls, using Instagram made their body image issues worse.
1 in 3. That's staggering.
It is. And it wasn't just teens or just body image. Their data showed over 40% of Instagram users, overall users, reported feeling unattractive while using the app.
So the app was actively generating the feeling. It wasn't just reflecting pre-existing low self-esteem.
That's what the internal research suggested. The feeling often began during the browsing session.
Wow.
And this negative feedback loop, it's immediate, it's continuous, and it's basically built into the business model.
How so?
The algorithms are designed purely for engagement. If you hesitate, even for a second, on a harmful image, say an extremely thin model, or a lavish lifestyle post that makes you feel bad.
The algorithm sees that pause as interest.
Exactly. It registers it as engagement. And what does it do? It immediately feeds you more content just like it, multiplying, reinforcing that negative self-comparison.
Because the pain keeps you scrolling, keeps you engaged.
Pain equals engagement in this model.
Oh.
The system is almost designed to trigger your insecurity.
And the consequences, especially after the pandemic lockdowns when screen time shot up, this went from just a social issue to a genuine public health emergency.
Absolutely. The sources connect that massive increase in time online directly to really severe mental health trends. Dr. Bryn Austin, a leading expert in this area, noted reports of rates of clinical eating disorders doubling, even tripling among young people in the U.S. during that period.
Doubling or tripling, that's terrifying.
It's a rapid spike, and the constant, unfiltered comparison to often unrealistic ideals on social media is seen as a major contributing factor.
And we can't ignore the money trail here, can we? This global anxiety machine is incredibly profitable.
It's the engine of huge parts of the consumer economy now. The sources estimate these massive advertising and influencer industries selling fashion, diet plans, cosmetic surgery, luxury goods are directly fueled by generating body and lifestyle envy. We're talking over $500 billion annually. It's sustained by showing these perfected images and lives, hoping you'll feel envious enough to buy something to try and emulate it.
Envy monetized on a massive scale, which makes the manga forms pretty resistant to change, doesn't it?
Of course. There's a huge financial incentive to keep the envy machine running, even if it harms users' psychological well-being.
The research also made a distinction about how we use these platforms, right? Passive versus active use.
Yes, this seems really important. Passive use, that's probably what most of us do a lot of the time. Just endless, idle scrolling.
Window shopping other people's lives.
Exactly. Voyeuristically viewing curated content without really engaging, not posting, not messaging, not commenting much. Research consistently shows this is the most harmful way to use social media.
Leading directly to drops in mood, life satisfaction.
Measurable drops, almost immediately. When envy gets triggered during that passive consumption, life satisfaction tends to decrease. You're just sitting there comparing your messy reality to their perfect highlight reel.
Whereas active use, actually posting, commenting, connecting with people,
Yeah.
that seems less harmful. Maybe even slightly positive.
It seems so. Because it involves actual connection, communication, it might mitigate some of that isolation that pure comparison creates. The key mechanism seems to be that passive following, especially on platforms like Facebook, really tanks life satisfaction when envy is triggered. It suggests that aimless scrolling is often driven more by destructive envy than by positive admiration.
Okay, now there's this other concept, which feels uniquely modern, uniquely digital. Self-envy. This sounds really twisted.
It is. Sherry Trickle wrote about this. Self-envy is when the persona you project online, your curated avatar, the perfect life you broadcast, becomes so idealized.
That your real self can't live up to it.
Exactly. You literally look at your own online profile, your own highlight reel, and you feel envious of it. You feel inadequate compared to the version of you that exists online.
Wow. So you've basically created a rival out of yourself.
Yeah, it must generate this intense, alienating feeling of inauthenticity, constant pressure to keep up the facade.
While feeling bad about yourself for not matching the facade you created.
It's a really damaging internal conflict, a self-consuming cycle of comparison and inadequacy.
But it's not all doom and gloom. The sources did mention people actively pushing back, injecting some reality into the feed.
Yes, thankfully. There's definitely a counter movement. People are disrupting the perfection narrative. You see accounts like Sarah Puto's. She posts those Instagram versus reality side by sides.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah.
Showing the difference between the perfect pose and just relaxing.
Exactly. It shows how much posing, lighting, and angles construct those ideal fitness bodies. It breaks the illusion, reminds people that what they see often isn't spontaneous reality.
And the other example was Katie Strino with the supersized posts.
Right. She confidently wears the exact same high fashion outfits as thin celebrities, sharing them side by side.
And she became really popular doing that.
Massively, because she directly challenged that single, narrow beauty ideal. She promotes body acceptance, shows that style and confidence aren't limited by size. It disrupts the core trigger for a lot of body envy.
So it shows that users can fight back. We can consciously choose to consume and create content that counters the negative stuff the algorithms push.
It's possible, it takes conscious effort, but these examples show it can be done. So envy isn't just personal. It's not just about buying things or feeling bad about Instagram. It's also a really critical tool for understanding how we view and ultimately treat different groups in society.
Okay, how does that work?
Susan Fisk's work here is foundational. Her stereotype content model, or SCM, it's a framework for mapping social perception.
Right, the SCM. It's elegant, really. It says we judge social groups, race, class, profession, whatever, on two main dimensions.
That's it, two axes. Perceived warmth and perceived competence.
Warmth being, are they friendly? Do they have good intentions towards us?
Yeah, friend or foe, basically. And competence is, are they capable? Can they actually act on those intentions, good or bad, skilled or unskilled?
Okay, and the model suggests that the groups falling in the mixed quadrants where warmth and competence don't align those elicit the most complex ambivalent emotions, like envy.
Exactly. Let's start with the envied groups. In the SCM, these are groups stereotyped as competent but not warm.
So, skilled, successful,
Mm.
but maybe seen as cold, aloof, self-interested.
Precisely. Think of stereotypes about rich people, maybe certain high-status professionals like investment bankers or sometimes successful minority groups perceived as outsiders. They're seen as capable, but not necessarily having our best interests at heart.
And the ambivalent emotion they elicit is envy. What does that envy translate to in terms of behavior? How do we treat these groups?
It leads to this weird mix. On one hand, passive accommodation. We generally respect their status, their power when things are stable. We don't usually try to actively sabotage them day to day.
Really?
But Fisk points out there's this constant underlying potential for active harm when the chips are down. When society feels threatened or unstable, these envied groups can become easy targets.
Targets for what? Taxes, regulation?
Yeah, or scapegoating in a crisis. And importantly, they are the prime targets for Schadenfreude.
Right. We feel that little thrill when the envied group stumbles, when the rich banker gets arrested or the cold celebrity has a messy divorce.
Because they're high status but perceived as cold, their misfortune feels almost deserved. It validates the resentment underlying the envy.
Okay, so that's envied groups,
Mm-hmm.
high competence, low warmth. What's the flip side? What about scorn?
Scorn groups. These elicit arguably the most negative reactions. They're stereotyped as neither warm nor competent, low on both dimensions.
Who falls into this category, typically?
Stereotypes often place groups like chronically poor people, homeless individuals, sometimes addicts into this quadrant. They're seen as lacking both capability and positive intentions, or at least as being irrelevant.
And the emotions they trigger are?
The most intensely negative ones, disgust and contempt.
Which leads to what kind of behavior?
The worst kinds, really. Active attack, things like verbal abuse, discriminatory policies, and passive neglect, just ignoring their suffering, failing to provide help or resources. Because they're seen as low status and basically useless, any moral obligation to help them tends to just evaporate.
And the sources mentioned perceived responsibility plays a huge role here, right? Especially with low status groups.
A massive role. Scorn towards low status people, like the poor, gets way worse if they're perceived as responsible for their situation.
Like if they're stereotyped as lazy or not trying hard enough.
Exactly. That perception fuels anger and resentment. It lets the observer blame the victim, which justifies dismissing them, neglecting them. We feel okay with our scorn if we believe their low status is somehow earned through their own failings.
So a hardworking poor person might get pity, but a lazy poor person gets scorn. The perception of effort totally changes the reaction.
It does. Which is interesting because our perception of effort makes less difference with the rich. We tend to envy them either way, whether we think they worked for it or not. But for the poor, perceived effort is critical in determining pity versus scorn.
It really shows how these emotions are tied up in justifying the social hierarchy, doesn't it?
And
We're constantly judging not just resources, but perceived merit.
we're policing the status quo, trying to make it make sense, even if it means resorting to harsh judgments.
But envy doesn't just operate at this big societal group level. It gets intensely personal. It creeps into our closest relationships, friendships, families.
And that's where it feels most dangerous, most taboo, because the paradox of proximity is just amplified enormously in intimate relationships.
You're so similar, the comparison is constant, and their success can feel like a direct threat to you.
Exactly, which might be why close friends consistently report higher rates of envy towards each other than they do towards relatives.
That actually makes a lot of sense. My best friend buying a house in my dream neighborhood feels way more relevant, more stinging than my cousin doing the same thing in a different city.
Right. The friend's success is directly comparable to your own life path. And the sources confirm that old cliche rivalry often flares up when something external comes between friends, like competing for the same job or attention or even a romantic partner. It threatens that core connection.
The relationship between the sisters Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell was used as this incredible high-stakes example of intimate envy. How it can drive creativity but also cause immense pain.
It's such a rich case study. You have these two brilliant sisters, both incredibly creative, constantly compared by everyone around them. Vanessa, the painter, seen as sensual, grounded, the one who could build a family. Virginia, the writer, cerebral, maybe more fragile, the intellectual powerhouse.
And their rivalry was actually fuel for their work.
It seems so. The sources talk about how envy pushed them, they prod and spur each other to do better. Each sister's achievement became a benchmark for the other.
A kind of benign envy driving creativity.
Partly, yes. But the personal cost was huge. Virginia felt this deep, corrosive jealousy and betrayal when Vanessa married Clive Bell. She saw it as breaking their unique, sacred, sisterly bond.
It wasn't just envy of the marriage itself.
Less envy of the marriage, more jealousy over the intimacy Vanessa now shared with Clive, and maybe envy of Vanessa's perceived stability, her status as the successful adult. Virginia's letters from that time were just soaked in this pain.
She actually wrote to her brother-in-law, Clive, didn't she? Something really raw.
Yeah, admitting something like, Nessa has all that I should like to have, and you have her. Just brutal honesty.
It shows that deep paradox, right? She admired Vanessa immensely, maybe more than anyone, yet felt this intense competitive pain and jealousy at the same time.
Exactly. That complexity, the love, admiration, envy, jealousy, all mixed together, that's what gives these close relationships such intensity and often such friction.
And within families, the sources pointed out the ultimate taboo, parent-child envy.
Yeah. Envy between siblings is common, even expected. Envy in romantic partnerships, especially modern ones where careers are comparable, is also frequent, though maybe still hard to talk about.
But parent-child envy.
That's considered the greatest taboo of all. It's something you rarely hear discussed outside of, like deep psychoanalysis or literature. It just violates our core expectation of parental altruism and protection so profoundly.
Okay, we spent a lot of time on the personal pain, the social media nightmare, the group dynamics, but now we need to shift gears completely.
Right. To envy's surprising ancient role in actually maintaining social structure, particularly in early human societies.
This is where we look beyond the individual feeling bad and see how anthropology suggests envy was maybe critical for keeping hunter-gatherer societies fiercely egalitarian.
Absolutely. Studies of groups like the Juhuansi and the Kalahari Desert are fascinating here. Their egalitarianism wasn't some lofty moral ideal. It was a practical necessity, and it was fiercely enforced. And the tool they used, pure envy.
Envy was the enforcement mechanism.
It acted like this constant shadow to self-interest. It ensured resources kept flowing, and crucially, it prevented any one person from grabbing too much status or power.
Because individual status was seen as a threat to the group.
A huge threat. In environments where resources were scarce and everyone depended on cooperation, one person accumulating too much status, creating debts, acting like a big man, that could fracture the whole community. So envy became the group's way of policing the individual ego.
How did they do that? How did they use envy socially?
They developed specific customs designed to preempt status buildup. The most famous example is that ritual called insulting the meat.
Right. This sounds amazing. Tell us exactly how it worked.
Okay, picture this. A really skilled hunter comes back after days of effort, maybe brings down a huge animal like a giraffe, enough food to feed everyone for a while, a major success.
You'd expect cheers, praise, right?
Logically, yes.
Yeah.
But instead, the people who were due a share of the meat would perform this required social ritual. They would publicly insult the kill.
Insult it.
They'd say things like, what, only this worthless pile of bones? Or this meat looks old and stringy, even if it was a magnificent kill, just downplaying it completely.
That sounds incredibly rude, especially to someone who just provided for everyone.
It was rude, but it was totally expected, totally strategic. And the hunter, they were required to respond with extreme humility, apologize for bringing back such a meager offering.
Why? What was the point of this whole performance?
The Zhuangzi themselves were very clear about the purpose. It was to cool his heart and make him gentle, to stop the successful hunter from thinking of himself as a chief, a big shot.
Ah, so it wasn't about hating the success itself. It was about managing the ego that comes with success.
Exactly. Preventing the accumulation of individual status, preventing others from feeling indebted, keeping resource distribution communal and horizontal, not hierarchical.
It's like the community's collective envy was channeled into this ritual to keep individual ambition in check for the good of the group.
That's the evolutionary genius of it. They recognized the power of ego and status hunger, and they built a social mechanism to head it off. Anyone who boasted, anyone who got lucky with a big kill or a good trade, they'd immediately face this ritual teasing, the status leveling.
And the result was social harmony.
A kind of harmony maintained because everyone was constantly jealously watching everyone else, making sure nobody got too big for their boots. This fear of being singled out for arrogance created this enforced humility.
It's envy as a social regulator, making sure individual gain didn't break the group.
It's a powerful demonstration that envy, when it's socialized, when it's ritualized, can actually be the glue that holds an egalitarian system together. It reinforces that the individual good can't come at the expense of group cohesion.
This anthropological stuff feels incredibly relevant today, doesn't it? It suggests our gut reaction to inequality isn't just learned, it's wired in deep.
It strongly suggests our sense of fairness almost certainly has a strong genetic component. And that helps explain a really fundamental aspect of modern politics.
Which is
Why inequality itself is often a much more powerful political motivator than absolute poverty.
so people aren't necessarily angry just because they're poor.
They're often more enraged because someone similar to them seems to have way more, maybe without a clear, justifiable reason. That feeling of unfairness, that relative deprivation, activates that ancient comparison and status policing mechanism much more intensely than just lacking resources in absolute terms.
The comparison that stings.
Precisely. This is why, as the sources say, gaudy displays of wealth can make even reasonably content middle-class people froth with rage. It's like watching that hunter boast about the kill. Our ancient sense of fairness, honed over millennia, kicks in and demands the status be leveled.
Which explains why politicians, across the spectrum really, often gain traction by positioning themselves against elites.
They're tapping directly into that deep, visceral, evolved response to status difference and the pain of comparison. It's potent stuff.
Okay, so we've seen envy is powerful, it's neurological, it's social. But day to day, for the individual, it often just feels bad, destructive. So the big question for anyone listening has to be, how do we actually take this poison and turn it into something useful?
Right. How do we harness it? The first and maybe the most crucial piece of advice comes from therapists, like Lori Gottlieb.
What does she suggest?
She advises clients, stop running from envy. Stop trying to suppress it. Instead, pay really close attention to it.
Why? What's the value in focusing on such a negative feeling?
Because, she argues, envy shows you what you want. It's like a flashing neon sign pointing towards your unacknowledged dreams, your hidden passions, maybe a purpose you haven't dared to pursue.
Okay, so if I keep feeling that pang of resentment whenever my friend talks about, say, quitting their corporate job to become an artist, That feeling isn't really about them.
It's probably more about you. It's a clue. It's highlighting the creative path you might be longing for but are too afraid or maybe feel too constrained to follow yourself. Envy forces you to confront what you value.
It signals deprivation in an area that matters deeply to you.
Exactly. So the first step in transforming it is simple but really hard. Just acknowledge it. Identify the feeling. Say, okay, I'm feeling envious right now, without piling on shame for feeling it.
But how do we catch it before it spirals into that dark resentment?
Yeah.
Are there practical signs, like little red flags, of undiagnosed envy?
Yeah, we need to learn to spot the malicious envy indicators creeping in. First sign,
Yeah.
you just feel negatively towards someone, even though they haven't actually done anything to hurt you. You just don't like them, often purely because of their success or happiness.
Okay. What else?
Second, you find yourself obsessively comparing yourself to them. Like you're running this constant imaginary competition in your head, and you always feel like you're losing. And third, maybe the clearest sign, you feel that little flicker of satisfaction that schadenfreude when the person you envy gets criticized or fails or suffers some kind of setback.
Right. That little serves them right feeling.
That's a huge clue you're in envy territory.
Okay, so let's say you have that flash of recognition. Uh-huh. That's envy talking. How do you pivot the energy? You mentioned the difference between negative envy and positive emulation.
Yes, this distinction is key. The focus has to shift away from the other person. Envy, remember, is the pain we feel because others have good things we lack. Emulation is the pain we feel because we lack good things that others have, but it's combined with the determination to get them.
So it's a subtle shift from focusing on their possession to focusing on my lack and what I can do about it.
Subtle but profound, because the action required by emulation is constructive. It drives you to learn, to improve, maybe even to ask the envied person for advice or mentorship instead of just silently resenting them or criticizing them.
Okay, so acknowledge it. Shift focus from them to your own lack. What else? There was a technique about celebration.
Yes, this is a powerful psychological judo move. When you feel that flash of resentment, ugh, why does she get all the luck? Or
Yeah.
I just don't like him. You consciously choose to do the opposite of your negative impulse.
So instead of muting them on social media or complaining about them internally,
You find a genuine way to celebrate their success, wish them well, congratulate them, even if it's just in your own head initially.
how does that actually work? How does celebrating help me?
By celebrating, you reframe the situation. You stop seeing them purely as a status threat, and you start seeing them as maybe a pioneer or that existence proof we talked about. You're essentially signaling to your own emotional system, this success is good, this is possible, this is something I admire and maybe want for myself.
It breaks the link between their win and my pain.
It helps break that link. It channels the competitive energy towards supporting the goal itself, not just resenting the person who achieved it. You celebrate the possibility.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there was this deeper cognitive tool, developing deprivation intolerance. What does that mean?
It sounds complicated, but it's basically a cognitive behavioral idea. It's about actively challenging the core, often catastrophic belief that fuels envy. The belief that lacking a specific thing, a job, a possession, a relationship, a talent, makes you fundamentally unworthy, defective, or a failure.
So instead of reacting to the comparison with shame, I don't have that promotion, therefore I'm useless.
You cultivate a different philosophy. You learn to tolerate the feeling of deprivation. You acknowledge, yes, they have something I want. You allow yourself to feel the lack, but you actively decouple that lack from your core sense of self-worth.
Okay, so it's like saying, I can want that, and I don't have it right now, but that doesn't make me less valuable as a person. I can survive this feeling of not having it.
Exactly. You build tolerance for the discomfort of not having without letting it define you. This directly fights the negative hit to self-esteem, which is arguably envy's most damaging personal effect.
So really, this all comes down to accepting that these complex, difficult emotions are just part of being human. We're not trying to surgically remove envy.
No, not at all. It's about learning to read its signals correctly. And remembering that philosophical point. Real growth, maybe even moments of awe, often come from holding conflicting emotions.
Like the taste of envy in the most admiring friendships.
Right. That tension, that complexity, is what gives life richness and intensity. Trying to flatten everything out into a state without negative emotion, that can be just as unhelpful, just as stagnant as letting malicious envy run wild. Hashtag had outro.
Yeah. Okay, so this deep dive has really shown that envy, this incredibly painful secret feeling, It's so much more than just a personal failing or one of the deadly sins.
It really is. It's a neurological reality hardwired through evolution. It's been a powerful social regulator throughout history, and now it's at the heart of a modern technological crisis, frankly designed for profit.
We got clear on that crucial difference. Envy is about lacking what someone else has, feeling shame. Jealousy is about fearing the loss of what you feel is yours.
Mm-hmm. And we saw how evolution makes us most envious of people who are similar, whose success feels attainable. That paradox of proximity is key.
And learning that the drive for status, even the good, benign envy, is often tangled up with Machiavellian traits.
Mm,
That was pretty eye-opening. The climb up the ladder isn't always clean.
not always. And then the really alarming part. The real public health cost of this NG overload from social media, platforms like Instagram being statistically linked to plummeting self-image, soaring rates of eating disorders, all fueled by huge economic drivers.
But then the perspective shift from anthropology, seeing how egalitarian societies actually used envy, ritualized it, like with insulting the meat, to police status and maintain fairness, it confirms that our gut reaction to inequality is incredibly deep-seated.
It really seems to be hardwired.
So wrapping this all up,
Mm.
what does it mean for you listening right now? Maybe the next time you feel that little green flicker, that pang of resentment. Ask yourself this question.
Mm.
Is this a warning sign telling me I'm heading down a destructive path? Or is this actually a roadmap? Is this feeling pointing directly towards my deepest desires, my unacknowledged goals?
That's the core question for harnessing it. And maybe one final thought, beyond the personal roadmap.
Go on.
True engagement with life, maybe true growth, means allowing these messy emotional contradictions to coexist. We shouldn't aim to just eliminate complex, painful feelings like envy. Maybe the real challenge is to wrestle with them, to wrestle with who we are and who we're willing to become, letting that internal tension spur us towards something better rather than letting it just drag us down into bitterness.
An ambitious challenge.
Yeah.
Difficult, maybe, but profoundly human. Thanks for diving deep with us today.